Okay, so hello everyone. I've spoken to many of you over the weekend outside on the bookstools. My name's Chandra Carter. I'm the UK coordinator for the Academy for Future Science, and I'm very, very blessed to be able to present Drs. JJ and Desiree Hurtak for you this evening. So Dr. JJ Hurtak, Ph.D, and Dr. Desiree Hurtak, Ph.D, MSc, are the founders of the Academy for Future Science, which is actually a non-governmental organization that works to bring cooperation between science and spirituality through the positive use of consciousness. They're social scientists, futurists, emphasizing a culture of peace at a time of great planetary change. Dr. Hurtak is the author of the best-selling book, The Book of Knowledge, Keys of Enoch, translated now into 20 languages. And together, the Hurtaks have written several books, including The Overself Awakening, and a commentary on the Coptic scroll Pistis Sophia, and their most recent, co-authored with physicist Elizabeth Rauscher, entitled Mind Dynamics in Space and Time. They are well known for their inspirational music, collaborating with Stephen Halpern, Jocelyn Smith, and Alice Coltrane. And they have won over 15 national and international awards for their graphic films Merkabah and the Light Body, and the latest title, Gates of Light. Dr. Hurtaks together have traveled throughout the world to investigate ancient cultures and to work closely with indigenous peoples, including the Givante Indians from Brazil and indigenous leaders in the Andes, as well as the Zulu shaman Credo Mutwa, for which they have produced an award-winning documentary called The Voices of Africa. They are respected archaeologists, having worked in both Mexico and Egypt, and have been instrumental in testing the acoustic properties of ancient temples and tombs, which show the extensive sound tones built into the architecture of these ancient monuments, and were part of the team to first discover in 1997 the mysterious tomb of Osiris under the Giza Plateau. They've traveled for more than 40 years around the world teaching science and spirituality, and they will speak again this year at the Parliament of World Religions in Toronto. Together, Dr. Hurtaks continue to use music and future science, a science guided by higher consciousness, to help unify cultures and at the same time assist indigenous cultures around the world to maintain their uniqueness within the larger global community. And so it's with my great pleasure I introduce you Dr. JJ and Desiree Hurtak.
It's a great honor to be here with so many gifted speakers, but you're the important part of this great consciousness change. And our title this afternoon is Activating Our Consciousness, Body, Mind, and Spirit, or to read from the Keys of Enoch, thus the direct relationship between the size of the universe, the diameter of the proton, and our range of vision is part of a larger mass energy space-time transformation, which involves changes in our basic concept of the known universe. And so as we begin to open the doors to the future and realize that we are potential cosmic citizens growing up in a vast and awesome universe, we invite you now to partake in some of the unique sounds that we have used throughout the world, connecting world cultures to what we will call a universal grammar of music.
Well, first, a little bit about some information, and we'll get into the singing and doing some meditation towards the end of our talk. But this is some of the images that our friends have worked on, and it basically shows that we're not just limited to the planet. You can see the pyramids. It's a little hard to see, but there's the pyramid in the background. And there's many levels of reality, and we are all interconnected with those levels. So it's not an ending here. I mean, we talk about we're non-separate from each other sitting in this room or around the planet, but we're also non-separate from other realms of intelligence. And this is some of the Kabbalistic trees of life, other energies, just to get that vision of what other realms and how interconnected we are with them.
So the indigenous people think of creation coming from the higher star systems and believe that we are at a time when the star nations will reappear. In fact, I'm wearing a belt from the Shivanti people of Brazil. They're one of the more than 15 tribes that Desiree and I represent at the United Nations. And they want me to wear this belt to tell the world that the cries of Mother Earth are not being heard, and we must add our voice in color, sound, sacred geometry, and wisdom so that we can open the doors to the greater living universe.
So we know we live in the Milky Way, which is full of billions and billions of stars. But in addition to that, now it's new evidence that the whole galaxy is full of billions of Milky Way type or similar type galaxies. So this is just one globular cluster with an idea that perhaps around any one of these stars are planets. Years ago, this is something that Dr. Hurtak had out in the 70s, and even in the 80s, if scientists had talked about a planet orbiting a star, they thought you were totally woo-woo, as Anita Morjani would say. But now, of course, we see there's many, many exoplanets that are out there, and there's a few that look very much like Earth. They're all called Kepler and with a number. But you can see that there's a vastness of the universe. So we're not just talking about our planet anymore. We need to realize that we are beings that exist, and we believe even our own species exists on other planets in other star systems. So what does that mean? Did we evolve from here exclusively? Well, we think the answer is no.
The Keys of Enoch, which we present a consciousness cosmology of many worlds. In 1973, I had a light experience. My physical body was bilocated into another dimension. I came back with light around my body, an example which we'll show you later. But the point is, I had the opportunity to work behind the scenes with several astronauts and government scientists who also recognized pragmatically there were other levels of cosmic intelligence knocking at our door. However, the scientific community had to take baby steps to quietly introduce the world at large to the fact that we're part of a cosmic family. The indigenous are correct in their celebration of life, but we have lost the rhythm of music and the dynamic of the cosmic dance in the West. And so we're at a time when spiritual evolution and scientific or futuristic evolution are meeting through consciousness.
Right, and so whether you think we evolved on this planet or not, it doesn't matter because it all comes from geometry, all comes from that greater web of life. And what you're seeing here is the brain on one side and the universe on the other. But you can see that there's a similarity between the patterning in our brain, the patterning in the universe. And I just want you to get that concept because in that way, we understand that we are interconnected not just in terms of the consciousness field, but actually in terms of the whole mathematical, sacred geometry relationship between body, mind, and spirit. And that's so important that there is this interconnection not only with consciousness, but also with what we know as who we are, how animals evolved, how plants evolved. You can see it in the Fibonacci of plants. I think many of you are familiar with that. It's all based on sacred geometry.
So in terms of looking at the greater evolutionary sequence, we're beginning to realize we are a living microcosmos within a macrocosmos in a real sense of intercommunication. Post-quantum physics has not worked out the relationship to mathematics, but this has been a part of private exploration by scientists at Stanford University, Harvard, and the great universities of the world. Where do we go from here in terms of a cosmic map or blueprint? Who are we really? As we begin to understand our body, there are many schools of thought.
Right, so we're going to take this in three parts, really. The body, then the mind, and then when we get into the meditation, mostly it'll be the spiritual energy. So there'll be 3 aspects. But let's look at the body, because it's very, very important to realize the vibrations. And we know that frequencies affect the body. Electromagnetic fields that come from wireless devices, microwaves, and cell phones all can affect even our DNA. But the right frequencies can also help your body. And we often say, gosh, if the phone companies would be able to understand this, we could be healing each other all from, BT Telecom. But they don't want to recognize that. Instead, they're putting out frequencies that really don't help who we are, that sometimes can cause disturbances in our bodies.
In the background of the screen, you see what we call a cosmogram, a cosmic picture, which entertains our consciousness projection. Intention, yes, you've heard this from many of the speakers, but also extension of intention allows one, through certain sacred geometries, to go into higher states or elevated states of creativity. And so my experience was to bring back these scenario abstracts of a language of color, sound, and sacred geometry, upon which we are able to see the convergence that is necessary between the 2 parts of the mind, the male and the female. What we've had is the dominant male, which is aggressive, pragmatic, and what we have seen excluded primarily in the West traditions of science and religion has been the female side of co-creativity, co-evolution, and the higher connective of the divine spark within the human.
So even if medical establishments are not really understanding these powers and fields that are unseen to us, yet can be felt by those who are sensitive, and our cells certainly react to it, some aspects of, we'll say, the healing modalities are starting to pick up on vibration and how to balance the energies. And these are physical. Again, we're going to get into the mind and the spirit later. But how can we use frequencies to heal ourselves? Well, there's a lot of new modalities, thank goodness, coming out. Pulse magnetic fields is one interesting, bioelectronics, and just electromedicine in general. This is something that we've been talking about since the 70s. Here's a device, doesn't even touch you. You just sit inside, and there's this magnetic resonance therapy. It's kind of similar to the MRIs that you do, but it's designed to help heal. And a lot of people have gotten some benefit or beneficial effects from it. I want to not limit to any particular one, but I want to say also, we're going to be talking a lot about the Hertz, H-E-R-T-Z, and abbreviated H-Z, and I wanted to just explain to people who maybe don't know how it works. Well, it's the distance traveled in 1 second. If you can see this, in 1 second you can get basically 4 cycles per second or 3 hertz. So you can kind of count 1, 2, 3. If you're going to speed it up and have more cycles, 8 cycles per second is 6 hertz. 16 cycles per second is 12 hertz. And you can literally kind of count those frequencies. Basically, as you see on the other side, we only hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz. So some people are a little bit more or less. Elephants actually hear really low frequencies. And then the idea of ultrasound is actually above what we can hear. It's very simple in that way.
So as we expand our range of music, as we supersensitize our higher states of consciousness, things begin to change. And we realize the keys of Enoch detail or describe our body is a biotransducer, processing sound, not only the direct sound waves of our immediate locality, but the non-local regions of the greater universe.
So sound pretty much is compression waves, but there's also a connection with electromagnetic fields.
So we're dealing with a new type of medicine, a medicine of sound, a medicine also of light. And some years ago, through the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, published here in London by Dr.
Kim Notes?
Yes, I and Desiree published several articles on the physics of consciousness, detailing some of the experiments we did with leading musicians.
Now, I'm really thrilled about this, and really, you can heal, again, with yourself without any of these devices. But it's exciting to know that medicine is slightly changing to realize that our whole body system is really vibratory, and that's the important thing, and that frequencies matter. Frequencies, whether it's generated by thought or by environment or whatever. I mean, frequencies were all light vibratory frequencies.
So we see here a model of the human, head with the interesting scientific skull cap, so to speak. Tumor treating fields being studied in Israel by Dr. Yoram Palti, founder and professional emeritus of the physiological and biophysics team at Technikon, has made a tremendous breakthrough, which we want to talk to you about.
Right. So what's exciting, this is being now accepted by the medical establishment, both in Switzerland and the United States, and it's amazing. So it's tumor treating fields. They use externally placed transducers attached to a field generator to create artificial electric fields. So it's very important to understand. It's mostly electric fields that they're working with to act on the proteins within the nucleus of cells to stop or cause problems with the cell division of cancer cells. So what they've shown is when they put out these frequencies through these electrodes, that the cancer cells stop duplicating. And even if they duplicate once, they usually cannot duplicate again. So it's an amazing technology. It's from this company called NovoCure, which I think that was in the last one, NovoCure. And it's actually even a stock market company, so it's been so accepted. It's only being used for glioblastoma, which is brain cancer, and lung cancer.
Glioblastoma is the most aggressive form of cancer. You get it, you're basically given a death sentence within 3 months to 2 years. But here we have actual positive results for the first time of how higher vibratory acoustics can intercept these lower waves and change the process of
And we do want to show that, there is papers, peer-reviewed papers. This is mostly from Wake Forest Medical Center in North Carolina. It's really the amplitude-modulated electromagnetic fields for the treatment of cancer. And the study identifies 1,524 frequencies ranging from 0.1 hertz, that's something that was brought up yesterday by Greg Braden, to 1.14 kilohertz, that's 114,000 hertz. Most frequencies were specific for a single tumor type, but examination of the patients with cancer led to the identification of frequencies that were either specific for a given tumor type or common to 2 or more. So you can see some of the numbers that they've come up with that they're using in these electrodes. And sometimes they don't just use one. I think that's really what changed in this technology. They're sometimes using 30, 50, even 100 different frequencies that seem to relate to the cancer, and they're being able to hold it in that way. So you can see these numbers. I don't have to try to...
They apply to breast cancer, various types of carcinoma, prostate cancer, et cetera, et cetera. This is a tremendous breakthrough, which really is going to change the perspective of medicine and, shall we say, open the door to a true medicine of light.
But what it really means is that they understand that frequencies and fields make a difference. They don't have to go in there all the time and cut things. Usually they won't do this unless they've already cut once and it comes back. I just have to say that because it's so FDA, Federal Food and Drug Administration approved. You have to be very, very careful in introducing this new type of medicine, literally, to humanity. So the idea that all of us are vibrations, that you can change things by getting the right vibratory frequency, and this leads, of course, to our last part, which is going to be music. When you have the right frequencies, you're able to also augment the body, heal the body in many ways. So this is the chart, and you can see they've done research with brain tumors. And these are tumor-specific frequencies, the number of frequencies sometimes they'll use for generating. And this will probably come down when they start using it more and more. It's a new technology that they're using. But we wanted to introduce that because really it has to do with vibration. And we are living vibratory
This is from
fields.
the Journal of Exploratory Research.
Yes,
And we see here one of our colleagues doing work in Africa, who is surrounded by these interesting geometric forms. It appears that cellular functions can be switched on and off through frequency-specific electromagnetic radiation, creating positive or negative resonances within the cell. So we have been working on this for many, many years behind the scenes with doctors as well as composers to see what type of musical environment would hasten really the rejuvenation process. And we have found, without too many exceptions, that music plays a very important role in the opening of the energy centers called in the East, the chakras, in the traditional Near Eastern metaphysics, the 7 seals of the body. We are a living microcosmos that is working with the whispers of the universe at all times.
Right. And so these electrodes are electric frequencies, but they also fall in the range of really, we'll say, the life force, the energy force that we're talking about. However, some of you may remember us from last year where we showed Sophia on Good Morning Great Britain. Well, we had the opportunity to spend a couple days with her in
at the
Arizona.
International Conference of Consciousness and Science in Arizona this year, where Sir Roger Penrose from UK was there, the greatest mathematician according to some experts, and we were there also with Dr. Hansen's special robot, Sophia. To my right is the Australian contingent of the Academy, and this is the other Brad Pitt. And his name is Brad Pitt, by the way. And our dear colleague the other day spoke of the actor Brad Pitt. We were talking about the scientist Brad Pitt. So again, in all due respect, we are working with some very outstanding researchers in Australia who are also facing what we have seen in Silicon Valley, where we're looking at AI, artificial intelligence, leading down humanity to a road of supercomputers.
So the question is, if we're frequencies, we're vibrations, also when you turn on a robot, there are also frequencies and vibrations. But there is a missing component, and that missing component is the consciousness linkage. We may be linked to the universe, and in some cases I believe that there is a consciousness minimalistic connection also to a three-dimensional reality that sometimes maybe Sophia or even your iPad can pick up on your energy reflected back to you.
When we talked to Sophia, she couldn't answer the purpose of life or the concept of love.
But they were teaching her, trying to do that.
And one scientist in the audience said, well, you can give her commands, but those commands can be erased. And we've seen this from research going on in South Korea, where military robots are in the demilitarized zone who shoot on command. One recently had a glitch and killed 27 people. Not reported in the press, by the way. But we see is that we're behind the scene, the games of the technocrats working with military adaptions rather than humanistic adaptions. And we feel that the humanistic or science that is human-orientated must take place before science that is object-orientated if we're going to make a major change from a culture of violence to a culture of peace.
But if you ignore our higher consciousness and if you ignore the spirit that is within us, we're really not that much different. And you can see our body is kind of electrically wired, so to speak. You see this from the acupuncture charts. But Dr. Tech in the Keys of Enoch brings up something more profound, that we have what's called Axiatonal lines, which are not just limited to our physical body. But
these are resonant circuits within our body that connect with the acupuncture meridians, and also on a higher subtle level connect with the astrophysical forces, or we would call the cosmic oscillations from the plenum of the universe coming through the human body as a filter system. And this picture comes from a collection I brought back from China in the early 70s. The Chinese were gracious to me. I spoke before their Academy of Science, and as you know, acupuncture science is the oldest systematic biofeedback system in the world, going back not 6,000 years, but I believe on the oracle bones, even 9 or 10,000 years, if you think of smooth stones that were used for acupressure rather than acupuncture. So we have an interesting contribution of Eastern science, and we were privileged through our lawyers in California to make acupuncture medicine acceptable to medical associations and also to state governments so that people could receive treatments and have a tax write-off for this.
But ultimately, if you look at this, and then you look at Sophia, probably the lines and the alignments of energy are not too distant, and they now have her moving her fingers, and they have robots that can jump over, we'll say, hills and certain rocks and big platforms and obstacles. So they're starting to get to that point. But the axiatonal, or we'll say the chi energy, is something much more profound. Now, this is from the Keys of Enoch. Some of you know this from the Reconnection, because Eric Pearl was able to pick up on some of the information from the Keys to...
Most of his healing methodology goes back to the Keys of Enoch, Key 317, for example. Axiatonal lines are not limited to a physical body or a biological creation, but are open-ended and can connect the body vehicle with axiatonal lines that emanate from the various star populations and exist as chemical code mechanisms. In short language or shorthand, our body comes from a higher cosmic design. We are from in the corpus design already structured on a much higher level of vibration.
So that's what you see in this picture there, because you see the physical body at the very bottom, but you see this energy body. Now, most of you probably imagined, well, that's you sitting in the physical and then your higher self that you're going up into. But what happens if we turn that around? What happens if your higher self is that, we'll say that pink body standing straight up, and then it's coming down to you? We feel that it's a two-way street, so to speak. And that's really how the axiatonal lines work, that you're not limited to the physical sitting down there trying to create something that's more profound than you are. You are more profound. And I think Anita Morjani was trying to say that too, that she's constantly in touch with that higher aspect of who she is that exists in the greater realms, and therefore she has that information to know what she needs to do when she needs to do it.
So beside the electromagnetic body, we have an epikinetic body. And I discussed this with Bruce Lipton, and he agreed that the epikinetic, which would be the use of the protein movement, is part of the vibratory system that is also crucial to understanding the different electrochemical shells that we occupy. In short, we are a cosmic being, but we are also a solar being, we are a planetary being, we are a Earth-centered ecological being altogether through the vibratory shells or clothes that we wear in terms of states of consciousness.
And continuing with the Keys of Enoch, for the human body is a microcosmos or small space-time field within a larger field. If we can maintain this view, we can recognize that acupuncture is one of the first empirical demonstrations of biological scaling within the universe. That's that greater web design that we were talking about. So you see the physical body, but then there's the web of energy around you. There's also, if I go back, the web of energy in the higher realms. This is all the interconnectedness that we share with each other. It's not me, it's not just one person, it's everybody.
Desiree and I were privileged to work with 3 astronauts, and the astronauts were, so we say, bemused when they were in outer space that they were able to document that there were sound structures that were there. This shook up the intelligentsia of NASA, who felt there was nothing in deep space, nothing that resembled sounds, or what Gustav Holst, the great European composer, called the music of the spheres, and what the Greeks talked about. But surely there were those sound structures. Even the Egyptians, according to Charlotte de Lubitz, designed their temples along the Nile according to the blueprint of the human body, where there would be resonance points. Now, we've done our research behind the scenes. We haven't published on this because of, so that we say, the territory demanded by the Egyptians in the use of new technology. Nonetheless, we will be publishing on how certain temples along the Nile do reflect the 7 chakras of the human body and the energy circuits that are very important in terms of axiatonal transmission and healing.
So we're saying it's not just unique, it's really this whole Fibonacci mathematical encoding that you find in flowers, in plants, in the human body, and that you also find in temples. So the ancients understood that the body is the temple is the body. There's an interconnectedness with all of nature in all ways. So let's take a look. This is from the Keys of Enoch, the picture on your right.
Which is called the Merkabah, or the energy geometry that allows the human body to have contact with the other realms of intelligence and even physically biolocate. This was originally published in our text in '73. In the early '90s, Nature magazine, the most important scientific publication in the English language, also highlighted this particular pentagonal structure, essential to the dodecahedral system through which interesting physiological and psychological modalities interconnect, exchange energy.
So they're always looking for the shape of the universe. We don't necessarily feel the whole shape of the universe is based on this geometry, but it was something that was proposed because these are all sacred geometries. There's something called the cosmological constants, like the speed of light and certain other mathematical functions. And really, you put those things together and you understand the geometry that they make together. And that's what we live in, and that's how we're formed. So whether we're created again on this planet, it would be on a particular form based on consciousness of who we are. And so this is one of our other books called The Overself Awakening. And you can see, and that's why we put the arrows going up and going down, we feel we have a higher self first and foremost, one could call it a light energy garment, and that it projects down into the physical form of us and who we are. And ultimately, some people have been able to reconnect with that higher self on a regular basis. Some people only get glimpses of that. The higher self, or over self as we call it, does not exist in a limitation of time. And I think that's really important and hard for us to understand, that that higher self could actually project simultaneously a physical form, say 4,000 years ago, or a physical form 2,000 years in the future, should the planet be here or on other planets. So
now we're going beyond the spooky frontier that Einstein spoke of in terms of the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen threshold, and realizing that non-locality does allow a part of our mind to project itself any place, or shall I say, be at any place, because there is no motion. There is a reality that simply manifests itself faster than the speed of light, through which knowledge is acquired and transmitted. Now, this particular book is important because it gives diagrams or cosmograms of how we can self-program ourselves, self-program our DNA, RNA, through various stages. And the use of these pictures are very important because they highlight that part of states of awareness that we're not completely understanding until we go to music and the rhythms of the universe.
So, but it also shows that the consciousness is the linkage, and I think that's extremely important. We'll be talking more about that. So do we really have a body, or are we living in a simulated universe? Jude Kerghovan didn't really agree with the simulated universe, either do we, but I think it's important that we understand the concept, because scientists now are starting to create these virtual reality games, right, all the time, and they play in them. Even really scientists are doing it, not just kids. And you can go and visit Pluto and actually go around 360 degrees, or you can go into even the Great Pyramid in some cases and look 360 degrees. You feel like you're there on a spaceship or whatever. So, you know, we can do that. It's gone from very, very primitive games that we had in the 80s and 90s to almost real realities for some. And so this has sparked the understanding by some scientists that this whole reality may be simulated. So what we experience as reality is actually, this is their theory, a giant computer simulation created by a more sophisticated intelligence. Perception of what we are becomes a controlled hallucination. So I just want to say, this is not a few crazy people. The people who are purporting this are Elon Musk from Tesla and SpaceX, Brian Greene from the Superstrings and all those TV shows you might have seen on Nova, and Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's an American astrophysicist, author, and science communicator. Since 1996, he has been the director of the Hayden Planetarium in New York City. That's like one of the top planetariums. We don't really believe we're living in a simulated universe, because the assumption here was that it's easier to create a simulation than a real universe. But what happens if we're dealing with beings that are more profound and can just as easily create real universes with manifestations of themselves, like a simulation manifestation, into this reality? And that's kind of what we feel is happening. So you have beings like this who have the ability to create themselves in a real universe. Why
they were called avatars, or masters of great creative experience.
But why does it have to be simulated? I mean, if we're talking about, we're thinking simulated because we're creating virtual reality games and it seems simulated. But what about if the beings that are creating this are way beyond any simulated games, but are actually, and these aren't, and I'm not even saying games in the real reality, but simulated new universes that they themselves are manifesting. So I'll take out the word simulated in that. New universes that they are able to experiment with, to manifest into, and to create new realms. And that's what we think is really going on, and it's positive. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're going to expand reality, you would create new realities. Whether we can do it, well, from our higher self. That's just one aspect we wanted to introduce there. We kind of see it like this.
Multiplanes of evolution. According to my experience, our human evolution is an introduction to a higher evolutionary process of graduating from the material to the transhuman into a body of light consciousness.
But in a sense, there's no real separation. That's the key. There's no separation except the fact that we're living here right now, and we don't have the concept that we have this higher self that's able to do that. But we feel, in a sense, that higher self is trying to reach us. We're just in a kind of a limited three-dimensional, fourth-dimensional reality.
If we can go back one slide, we see the different levels of consciousness. We see humanity on Mother Earth, but then as we progress, we see there's what some scientists behind the scenes working with the government call the meta-terrestrial, the ultra-terrestrial, the ultra-celestial. There's so many different categories now that we're beginning to examine in terms of the larger blueprint of where we are in the game of the universe. Ultimately, at the top, according to most of the great traditions and the movements of thought, are the avatars or angelic beings, simplified or activated by this dove, which represents peace, accord, harmony, and similitude with the divine spark.
So in a sense, Dr. Tech calls this Schoolhouse Earth, and that was the subtitle of our book, The Over Self-Awakening, A Guide to the Schoolhouse of the Soul. So we're kind of learning how to reconnect, how to improve our reality so that we can reattach to the greater reality.
So here we're using pictures to describe something quite interesting and interconnected between states of consciousness. At the bottom of the picture, I'm using my laser beam to show the human and the girl child that's pointing to the higher self, and that is the...
consciousness being is our blue being, it's our higher consciousness that
think
reaches
of the movie
out.
Avatar with the blue being, the extension going through the cloud of information in present-day science, and ultimately a connection takes place through higher vibration and what we will call acoustical physics with the greater intelligence, the face of which is clothed. That is the female nature of life.
And for the most part, the cloud here is kind of protecting us or keeping us somewhat ignorant of our higher self, even though the consciousness body is now making that interconnection between the other realms. So in essence, we are consciousness first, because these beings may not be physical. So they don't have a manifestation in the third-dimensional realm. If there are three-dimensional realms, what do you manifest? How do you manifest into them? If you're fifth or sixth or even eighth-dimensional beings, how do you manifest into the third dimension? That's a big question.
This would explain, as it were, the impasse that some governments have had in terms of telling the people through disclosure that we are being visited by a variety of cosmic civilizations. Some seem to be ultra-terrestrial, some to be meta-terrestrial, some to be interterrestrial. So where does one draw the line? Of course, one needs the teamwork of a worldwide scientific commons.
So now we're going to move into the mind. That was kind of the body. So now we're going into the mind, understanding the consciousness mind. As biotransducers, we are senders and receivers of thoughts and signals that produce thoughts within us based on our desires or our mindfulness. So in other words, quantum physics will tell you there's multiple possibilities out there, and many people just pick up on the easiest thought that comes into their head or whatever their desires are. They kind of try to grab from that. But we really have an ability to do much more, to pick up on the vastness of the cosmos. We're going to see a little bit, which we've shown some of you in the past.
This is research with our colleague Russell Targ, who's considered one of the fathers of remote viewing, program that was paid for by the U.S. intelligence community to a tune of $20 million at Stanford Research Institute. Our scientific papers are on the internet. Over 600,000 pages of remote viewing do exist. And the accuracy is much greater than that which was done by NIH, National Institute of Health and the Study of the Effects of Aspirin. So we're dealing with situations over 1 billion to 1 in terms of accuracy carried out by U.S. military intelligence in the 1990s and slightly before by Russell and colleagues. For example, if I may carry on, we see the drawings at the bottom left of a Soviet installation at Semipalatinsk in Central Asia. The SRI, the Stanford Research Institute, psychic, using remote view, and was able to draw clearly an apparatus similar to what you see in Soviet Central Asia. Later verification showed how accurate he was. The size of the human can be seen next to the size of the wheel. Amazing details through non-locality showed the Americans and Russians there was no such thing as private or secret information. And when Russell went to Moscow to talk to the Russian Academy of Science, when he mentioned there was no such thing as secret information, he said you could hear a pin drop in the auditorium. The Russians were amazed that the Americans had these high-level sensitives that could see and describe scientific details.
Right, so Russell's coming out with a film, I think it's set to be released next month, called Third Eye Spies. It's really excellent. If you happen to see it in your email box, go ahead and try to check that out. In addition, one of the things that came up is someone asked our President Jimmy Carter, when he had left office, what was the most amazing thing that happened that was strange while you were in Washington? And he said, well, actually, there was a downed Russian plane in Africa, and we wanted to get there before the Russians did. This is way before all the electronic radars and stuff like that. So we asked the psychics, and they told us exactly where it was, and we got there before the Russians, and we got the information that they wanted from the plane. So, I mean, it's amazing. They have used it extensively. We can talk about that in another time, but really anyone can do this. And this is non-governmental. This is the Hawaii Remote Viewing Group. And you can see the photo was held in a sealed envelope by a skeptic as part of the test. And you can see exactly that there is some sort of movement. And this is our book with Elizabeth Rauscher. But I say you can use it for everything. I mean, Elizabeth Rauscher really remote views the food store. When I say to her, what do you want for dinner? She remote views the food store to tell me what's good or not. You can do it for everything. You can figure out where your child is when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and anything like that. If you start developing this sixth sense, which I think we all also have.
This book was written for skeptics. It's over 600 pages of mathematics and physics by some of the best minds in the United States, describing the mind over matter, the distant viewing, the distant healing, the remote viewing projects by the scores that were studied intensely for 20 years. For example, here I am walking with a group of scholars at the university in Cairo, Egypt, unbeknownst to Elizabeth, who simply was tuning in to me at a certain time of date.
From Arizona.
Some 6,000 kilometers away. She was able to describe 4 people walking in formation next to what appears to be a light pole. That's interesting because of the spherical nature of the bulb at the top, but also the mesh or the embroidered architecture beneath the sphere at the top and the bottom, exactly matching what you see there at the University of Cairo in Egypt. More importantly, she's also able to describe the colors that are unique and different that appear also into our mind or mental picture that happen to be that on the door of this major auditorium.
It was an unusual blue door because it was kind of a metal blue. It was very strange.
So this takes really the top off of government secrecy. Again, I don't want to overemphasize, but I will, the importance of this book. This is the real X-Files. This is why you haven't heard of us for many years. Some of you have never heard of us because we have been doing the work in many countries throughout the world, teaching people that they have this ability of remote viewing, and if they use music to open the heart, the mind-heart connection is important because you don't want military intelligence to have the end game. You have to have the end dance. The end dance is a human-orientated science or future science, science guided by consciousness, rather than science orientated to death applications. And this is why Russell left the program. And certainly we're not interested in supporting
the military
type logic. Those paradigms do not work, as we'll see in the coming decade. We have to see a consciousness shift towards the higher overself or the body of love vibration that is there inherently in the very design of our heart.
But how do you train yourself? Well, you know, before you pick up your cell phone, figure out who's calling you. You should never be losing your keys again because you should always be able to remote view them. In fact, a friend of ours who's in the audience, she lost her keys just the other day, or a purse, I should say. And Darren, who's going to be up here shortly with our music, actually, he called his friend, who's a great remote viewer in Australia, and he said exactly where her keys keys were. So, I mean, really, you don't need to lose your keys anymore. Anyway, some other exciting things. We worked extensively with Dr. Emoto, and of course, it's the late Dr. Emoto, but we want to keep his thoughts alive because he had a lot to do with consciousness and the mind. So this is the picture of water for negative thinking. Not looking very good, and I think, as most of you know, and this is the picture of water with positive thoughts of love and gratitude.
Connecting, of course, classical music, or what he defined as the positive response to the inner sensory system.
And of course, a lot of your body is water. So if you really want to think negatively or project negatively to others, do you want that in your body or on their body? No. Do you want it like this? Yes. So that's one way of looking at it. He also looked at music, and so this is very important. About 70% of our body is water, and if you listen to heavy metal music, according to Emoto, this is his study, you can see that kind of energy that doesn't look too clean or good. And yet, imagine, I had to add that for all the British here, John Lennon, you have this beautiful music. So it can be modern music, doesn't have to be, you know, classical. He did a lot with classical music as well.
With also Bach. With Sanskrit-oriented music. And of course, some of you know I was on the music faculty with Ravi Shankar in the 1970s. And so our test of biofeedback were with Sanskrit music as well as Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, Coptic sounds to see if higher states of consciousness could be resonated more quickly.
So everything you're doing, everything you're thinking, and even the music you're playing actually has effect on you and those around you. So this is something to just remember and to be aware of. So we know the human brain works by using electric signals. Biochemical processes create electric potential in nerve cells and chemical substances, the so-called neurotransmitters, the information contained in the electric signals from cell to cell. But what we don't realize so often is how easy it is to change the vibrations. We do it kind of automatic. We're on automatic all the time for the most part. You have the gamma frequencies of the brain. You can see the hertz here, and it's from 30 to 42 hertz. And that's extreme focus. So when you're studying for an exam, that kind of thing, you're usually in the gamma. The beta has to do with waking, about 13 to 30 hertz. The alpha, relaxing, 8 to 13 hertz. The theta for deep meditation, 4 to 8 hertz. And delta for sleeping, 0.5 to 4 hertz. The delta may even be lower, but sometimes it's really hard to measure some of that. So that's how our mind is working right now. I'm hoping most of you are in the extreme focus. Are we? Okay, good. But anyway, the yogis are. So this is one amazing experiment by Richard Davidson, who's really a director of the Center for Healthy Minds at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He put in, of course, that's a great, yeah, that's not a hairdressing thing. That is electrodes on the brain.
Yeah,
and
I can read just quickly in the yogis, gamma oscillations are far more prominent feature of their brain activity than other people. The contrast between the yogis and controls in the intensity of gamma was intense. On average, the yogis had 25 times greater amplitude gamma oscillations during baseline compared with the control group. Now, yesterday, we saw pictures from Konstantin Korakov, a great scientist and friend, of work that was done years ago with Dr. William Tiller. And he was on the Academy of Parapsychology board when I was working with the Academy of Parapsychology and Medicine in California, and we were studying the yogis at that time in the early 70s. And what surprised us was the yogis were able to drop their blood pressure, to control their heartbeat, even to a point of really close to near state of death.
But it shows in their meditation they can move into this extreme focus. So here you see the control group, very little in terms of the gamma frequencies, and this is just the charts of the practitioners of the yogis, how they can get into extreme focus. And the same here with the practitioners versus the normal control. So
you remember years ago there was a picture of Catholic nuns who were practicing Zen meditation as well as Eastern meditation using a variety of we call mantra expressions, and you could see the lower or the back part of the brain cavity showing a higher state of restfulness
I mean, we don't think about that. We think, okay, we're going to go into meditation or we're going to go to sleep. But really, the frequencies in our brains are constantly changing, and you're starting to be able to see how you can, I hate to say the word manipulate, but manipulate what's happening within you.
There is thus a universal acoustical grammar that's available regardless of cultural or religious tradition that can be used by those who are open to the plenitude of creation and the fact that we are a multidimensional being. We are also a non-local being. And these are very important considerations. I consider it to be the greatest discovery since relativity, that we are a non-local as well as local human, that we can be here, but we can be other places on Mother Earth and even in parallel dimensions. And the physics is being worked out, and some of our papers are on the internet, and of course new textbooks are being written for the next generation. But we want to reach out to young people through these vibrations of love and unity, because this is where the action is.
Right, and mindfulness is one technique. It's usually a silent meditation, if some of you are familiar with that. We're going to move into more of the chanting and singing shortly, because that's what we like. But it also produces similar effects. What's mindfulness? Usually non-judging, I think that's important. Describing, which is like really being able to see things around you. Non-reacting, that's very, very important. And acting with awareness and observing. Now that's more traditional. I like to see it as care. And it's interesting, conscious awareness, relaxed experience. So when we care, we start putting that energy out into that field. Let's look at how this can be broken down. What's conscious awareness? Well, where we become aware of people and their perceptions and cease to focus only on our own point of view and from our own reality. We have to embrace the reality of others, but we can also be consciously aware of higher realities as well.
What Rupert Sheldrake describes as the ego-based material civilization that we're moving hopefully beyond by the challenges in front of us.
Right, within ourselves, where we start being consciously aware of other realities, to other dimensions, other thoughts that are coming in that are really trying to help us.
And then we have relaxed experience. When we do not overreact, we show respect for each other's differences and opinions. And the experience itself is applying consciousness awareness to any reaction or reactions.
So what is consciousness? Well, this is one of the realities that you can, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Consciousness is not the flow of sodium ions through your brain cavity. Rather, consciousness is that collective awareness that you are here, but also you are in a much greater embrace of the unseen powers of the plenum.
And it's not just the field around you, but it's actually the fields in other realities, up into outer space. That is the universal mind that we feel we can also tap into.
So think in color. And this is something that scientists caught up with recently in the 20th century. Think in multidimensionality. And here Desiree has described the human profile in terms of the inner parts, the neurophyrenes, going beyond the synaptic gap of how we are using colored geometries.
So consciousness is non-physical in the sense of classical physics, since it is working as the observer at the quantum level. Do you understand? Like if you have that higher self, that's the observer. And in terms of being able to change, I loved Anita Moorjani's discussion about her blood test would have changed. That's called, in quantum physics, delayed choice. So something can be going through, and then you choose to observe it or not. It will change based on what you have chosen, even after it's passed through that reality. You can look that up in terms of science, delayed choice experiment, mostly by Wheeler. But it's also entangled with the brain, and I think that's really important because we're all entangled together.
And the light over the head represents the opening of the 8th chakra, the ability to see and perceive other non-human events, even cosmic intelligence, according to the shamans that we work with and the social scientists in the field of investigations.
Now, where is the receptor of consciousness? I think that's a really important thing. Where do we receive the consciousness in our bodies? Well, in historical times, it was the blood. And the blood it's like a little pyramid. It has an iron in the center, and then you have 4 nitrogens around it. So it's like a mini pyramid. So the blood is one. The other we also feel in the brain is the pyramidal neurons. And
pyramidal neurons are our principal output neurons, composing approximately 80% of the neurons in our cortex region. So there is an interesting geometry here. The pyramidal cells or some would call the pyramid-like cells, act as electrocrystal cells which operate in the fashion of a liquid crystal oscillator in response to different light commands or signals.
Do you get that? They're like liquid crystals. So you think crystals receive information, your brain's receiving information. And Greg Brain mentioned the second neurons that are usually attached to this. This is the rose hips. But they basically turn on and off the frequencies. So it may be a kind of modulation. The pyramidal cells, scientists don't want to say pyramidal because of all the New Agers, but they're really pyramidal cells. You can see the geometry there.
So we have biocrystalline networks that are very important within our mind and within our body, and they also work as this transducing energy fabric.
Right. And also, so here the brain creates a tuning with the consciousness field, which is a non-local control process which steers the information by adjusting the probabilities of the interpenetrated possibilities or superposition. So you actually have many possibilities coming to you at once every time you think. And as you then grab that particular thought, because of desires or certain energy focuses that you do, you actually, what's called manifest that particular thought. But all the thoughts, all the possibilities are usually around you at all times.
So life is more than interconnecting Chinese boxes, as described here in the diagram. We're more than circuits of just the electromagnetic and the epikinetic field. We are also, according to the keys of Enoch and Echabody, of multiple states of relativity.
So one more scientific project, that's Peter Garayev has shown that the quasi-crystal, we just talked about the quasi-crystals in the brain, properties are also present in DNA, which seems to be a process of holographic information in conjunction with solitons. So that means the DNA, well, almost like Bruce Lipton has shown with the epigenetics that function on turning on and turning off other frequencies, the DNA also, according to Peter Garayev, is really coming from a light frequency energy that then becomes concretized into this reality. And so you can shift and change the DNA if you have the knowledge of how to alter the frequencies with positive thought, with love, with joy. You can also alter the energy within your DNA.
And we see on one side the micro DNA helix within our body, and also cosmically in terms of the macro helix, that which is in outer space. So we are a membrane of life between the micro and the macro.
So let's take a look, because there are different meditative techniques, but one that's popular throughout the centuries has not only been silent meditation, but also meditation with chanting or sacred sound vibrations. So why is sound important? That's something interesting. You know, it might be, okay, we can change our brain if we just sit quietly and focus and think positive thoughts, but is sound doing anything for us? Is there any benefit to sound? Well, the answer is yes, and that's why we showed you the very beginning, because frequencies make a difference in your body.
Ravi Shankar, the great sitarist, the maestro, told me that he could play in concert, leave his body, and go into the audience and look back at his body on stage. Through the vibrations of the sitar, he could sublimate his energy and project it from what we would call the 7th or the 8th chakra, the higher states of focused awareness, go into another dimension, look back, and describe accurately details while he was in a higher altered state of consciousness.
And many musicians do this, even though he was, of course, more adept at it. So the sound frequencies are vibrations that actually can, you know, make an impression on your mind and on your body. And of course, sound healing, frequency medicine is just beginning to be understood. All energy, including those in atoms and molecules and in turn cells, are electromagnetic in nature. That is, they produce electromagnetic fields. And most cells communicate through this process. Even the brain is not just chemical, but also electrical. So they're starting to see that it's not just the passing of a lot of chemicals in your brain, but actually the electric signals in your brain.
This is the theory of Royal Raymond Rife, who used frequencies in the radio frequency range, 20 kilohertz.
Yeah, he wanted to go beyond the human hearing.
To try to destroy cancer cells. This is why he was put out of business in some countries very quickly. But bringing this closer to home here in London, it's the Beatles and what they did with music that transformed. When I was working with East German scientists and musicians, they said it was the Beatles' music that led to inner liberation. People do not fully understand the importance of collective vibrations going throughout the world. So we can present this information which is highly technical, but in order to make it work, we need to reach the vibrations of the person on the street. And this is why our work is connected with the great musicians of the world, and why it's necessary to build a global tone that sweeps around the world. You heard from Greg Braden and others of the coherence process of connecting minds, which is great. But we believe because of the sleeping body, the inertia of the human biological system, people need to hear the vibrations and awake to the sound of the symphonic universe. We would call the synergy symphony that we are in at all times, but not fully conscious of.
But just a few things. First of all, music has been known and confirmed to work with heart rate variability, to help improve that, to help depression, many other aspects, because everything is vibration. And there's mind-body training that has shown the increase in the correlation between the frontal, the theta wave and the heart rate variability. There's many technologies. I don't want to spend too much time on the science, but just know that everything is interconnected in your body with frequency, with vibration.
We see here a diagram of typical magnitude frequencies, the biomagnetic signals, the environmental sound patterns that we're a part of in terms of the vibrations from the heart, the muscles, the brain rhythms, the brain responses, also that which is measured by squid sensitivity by Stanford Research Institute, the University of California specialists. So we are swimming in an ocean of sound, but it's what sounds work best with what chakras or sound points. And this is why we carried out also experiments with permission of the Egyptian government, in this case, inside the Great Pyramid. These are very sophisticated musical studies we've done. This has not been fully published. It will be done with the actual film taking place of paraphysical phenomena that appeared, for example, in the King's Chamber.
Which we'll show later in our meditation spirit.
A segment of this music will be heard. Desiree is here lying inside the King's coffer.
With a nice orb.
Major sepulchre. But what we discovered through very sensitive musical instruments is the open tomb represents the extended human body in a state of rest or meditation, and the heartbeat of 68 to 72 beats per minute was part of the musical synchronicity and coherence that we were able to show was built into the musical design of the Great Pyramid, which is, we're saying, an acoustical physics was already known to the ancients when they built these great monuments and great pyramids and temples as sound collectors that would resonate with the hum of the human heart, with the hum of the human brain, and connect the two, whereby those who were special initiates could go into actual cosmic contact or higher states of creativity.
And they have shown the melodies can trigger the release of dopamine and oxytocin can lead to feelings of happiness. The whole idea of sound frequencies can literally change the way you think. I think a lot of people know that. If they're stressed, you can sit down, listen to something quiet, and you just, release some of that energy. So it's worked. They've even seen it in brain scans of how this works. And really gives you a sense of cooperation, partnership, love, just by listening to sound frequencies. How does it work? Well, in the brain, I had to show you this. Basically, our whole ear is a kind of Fibonacci golden mean. So the cochlea
is the treble clef,
yeah,
the musical machine built into the biocomputer of the body that can be harnessed.
So, and then we receive also in a similar golden mean. This is so important to realize how connected we are with the universe around us. We're not really separate at all. So certain frequencies are picked up at different aspects of the cochlea until you get into the very inner structure of it. So that's how sound frequencies are received by your ear. It's amazing that we have the sacred geometry within us.
Years ago, Desiree and I worked with Marcel Vogel from IBM, who was looking at the music and communication of the plants in terms of the piezoelectric effect in the roots of plants with the human ear. And this pioneering work, of course, went into a book called The Secret Life of Plants. And this is just one small illustration, again, of the garden of sound that we're part of, if we take the time to reflect and feel the inner sensitivity.
Now, this is a British, we'll say, research report, and that's why I put it in here. I know everyone wants to get into the meditation, but it's important to understand this. So it's a research paper called Singing Modulates Mood. And that's why I'm kind of building this up so everyone's willing to sing, okay? So it's published by Cancer Medical Science Journal, associated with the European Institute of Oncology in Milan. It featured 193 patients who were either in remission or caring for cancer patients who were caregivers to now deceased cancer patient. And really just caregiving for a deceased cancer patient can be as traumatic, as we heard earlier today, as caring for cancer or doing cancer yourself. So each participant was involved in a Sing With Us choir in South Wales and at this cancer center funded by the study, and they had about 70-minute choir rehearsals. Now the choir members give a saliva sample and filled out a questionnaire assessing their mood and stress levels before and after the rehearsal. And these are basically the results. It's hard for you to see, but basically what it shows, and here's the data, that any time that there was afraid or anger, it went down. If they were, in terms of happiness, it went up. In terms of relaxation, it went up. In terms of stress, it went down. So really across the board, just singing 70 minutes in this choir actually changed each person's feeling in terms of their stress levels, their anxiety. So singing does help. It's been proven. Here's the actual paper if anyone is interested in really seeing it. It is on
Faculty of Medicine, Imperial College here in London, of course, the psychological group, the Department of Epidemiology and Public Health, also in London. I mean, there's tremendous work that's out there in the scientific literature. Why are we emphasizing this? We still have to go through this dialectic with the official scientific community, which is tone deaf. It doesn't want us to sing and to dance and to discover the greater science of consciousness.
There's a few other types of sounds, and we want to introduce today, because there's been a lot of tests with binaural beats. Can't see anyone's hand, so I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you know what they are. But basically, it's been used by the Monroe Institute in the United States and many other people. And what it is if you hear from one ear, you actually have to have headphones for this, but we're still going to kind of play with it anyway. If you hear a frequency from one ear, say 428 hertz from one ear and 438 hertz on the other, so you're wearing headphones, the missing 10 hertz will actually be created in your brain. So this is an amazing thing. That's called binaural beats. It was discovered by Heinrich Wilhelm Dove in 1839. So it's similar to white noise generators, and they've been known to be helpful for concentration, to release anxiety, as those frequencies, because you're creating that 10 hertz frequency in your brain, which in that case would be in the alpha to theta frequency.
So keep in mind, we're going from a culture of violence to a culture of peace. And so as we reprogram ourselves from the violent scripting of the daily press and social media, we began to use the musical scripting as well as different meditation modalities to be at peace within ourselves and then feel that quiet peace in its musical nuance throughout the greater creation.
Right, so going back to 1989, there was actually a study, and you can see the reference there.
And Gokulski examined depression states in alcoholics using binaural beats.
Right, so some people went through the normal 12-step AA program, which we highly recommend as well for those who need it. And others were actually just exposed to 15, 20-minute sessions of alpha and theta binaural beats. And the control group attending the AA experience had an 80% relapse. I mean, they were, healed in that sense, but they relapsed back 13 months after the study. And the binaural beats experimental group experienced only a 20% relapse. So there's quite a lot, because it's changing the way our mind is functioning. We're going to listen, and again, you really need headphones for this, but we're just going to listen to a few of the sounds. So if one side is 438, the other is 428, you're going to be hearing a type of 10 hertz frequency in your brain. So this is what your mind would be experiencing.
Your mind becomes the global mind, and you're connected with the music of the spheres, step by step. The left and right hemisphere come together in marriage. The male and female unite. The ancient symbols from India and the Near East, the Shiantro, the Star of David, converge in multiple patterns and ultimately realize that every chakra or energy level of your body is a type of multidimensional vehicle.
Now, there's one other type of sound, which is kind of the modern version of that, and that's called isochronic tones. So if you're not listening to headphones and you don't, to get that difference, there can be actually a tone going on that you normally hear, and then underneath that tone is a particular vibration of that hertz frequency that you're trying to accomplish. So here you have a sine tone that we're going to be listening to of 432. This was created by Darren Curtis from Australia. He's joining us this evening to help with the keyboard, but this one he already recorded. And then there's a rate of 4.7 hertz. Every second there's a 4.7 tone heard of the 432 hertz. So it gives you that same vibration. Let's take a listen to that.
This is very important because our work inside the Great Pyramid of Egypt showed frequencies between 428 and 438 to be very important. In fact, every room that we did music study in the Great Pyramid suggests a different circulatory system of the body was being activated.
And I just want to say very quickly, this is being done all over the world. So here's a study from Tehran in terms of 90 men from ages 18 to 45 who underwent surgery. And some of them were actually listening to music in addition to their anesthesia. And all the reports on that show that listening to music, even some of it was listening to have headphones with no sound, others were music, and others were just normal anesthesia. And in all, the music group actually had less blood pressure, a better pulse, a better respiratory rate. So we can't really get into all of this now. I want to show...
It's the body and mind coordination that ultimately leads to a higher overself or spiritual coordination, orchestration. So
this we showed last year, but because Darren is here, as you can see him, and then his beautiful wife Jessica is also with him, but she's sitting in the front row. And this is our group from Australia who were nice enough to put together this cymatic device with water, sounds, and tone frequencies. And it's important for everyone to see this because it actually shows the different tones make different sacred geometries. And that's what's important to realize, because we're all made of these sacred geometries that come together within our body, within the water, within life around us.
The flow of water is the secret process, and we see this here now in the film. Listen very carefully to the sacred resonance.
This is from Darren and his team. Takes a moment. This is their sound work with water.
What you are hearing are pure sine tones. .38 hertz.
But note the geometry, not just the sound, because they come together.
55 hertz. Chakra means wheel in Sanskrit. So think of these as vibratory circuits, each with a unique music pulse. Now it's 72 hertz.
He did pick certain numbers that are unique. Again, 70% of your body is water.
And now at 88 hertz. your biofeedback nervous system. So your body is a biotransducer in attunement with your mind, and through higher states of music can balance the distortion, the imbalance, the pain into higher quietude, 50 hertz. And then 36 hertz.
So I think you all get the picture.
Multiple geometries surround us, as we see here in the picture Desiree illustrated. We're in this type of cosmic matrix. Part of us is in the light, part of us is in the darkness. What we have to add is multicolor visualization.
Okay,
this is what we did in the Great Pyramid. And years ago, I was able to sing some of the Hebrew Aramaic mantras. And what happened is the energy became so intense, a standing column or wave appeared in the Grand Gallery.
This is the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid.
Suddenly, it broke into a powerful light surge that moved up and down the Grand Gallery, was captured on film. There's the golden section, of course, is the definition, or fire in the middle, for what the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians called the pyramid, the definition. Okay. We have seen through sacred language.
Yeah, this is from a drumming circle, the energies that were around it.
A variety of paraphysical forms, modalities can take place. These modalities can be spherical largely in nature, but they also are part of what I consider the visual process of orientation we're going on right now, according to the shamans and the social thinkers. We are on the brink of this great consciousness change that's going to open up a greater vision or mind's eye from our higher self.
So let's give it a try. We're going to start very basic, then we're going to talk a little bit more about the spiritual side, and then we're going to go into our meditation. But we're going to start with the power of Om, and Darren's going to lead us, and he'll do also, don't try to follow him if you're not into it, but he'll do overtone singing. So you'll hear some other frequencies coming from his throat. It's also called throat singing. And
listen very carefully. It's the overtones that are very important.
But we'll start with just the basic Om. We're going to be building for the rest of the time. You can join in.
Center. So
That's just warming
The
us up.
chakras are connected through these overtone signals, and as you begin to loosen yourselves and enjoy the musical heritage that is here in Europe behind the great composers, and you add your sound syllables, again, we unite the world, humanity, through this global sound. This is the research that Carlos Santana and yours truly are part of, to create in all cultures a higher musical vibration that brings humanity together. People don't have a chance to go to school to read these big textbooks. They don't have a chance to debate these scientific conferences with the elite of the major universities. No, the people in the street need music.
And I was going to say, don't be afraid of change ahead. So when you go with this meditation, you start working on higher levels, whether it's silent, if you prefer silent, or verbal that we do. You know, go with the flow of your life. Get in tune with that still small voice within. And always ask for peace to prevail on earth, because that's very important, because we're really beings of light, or way showers for the planet, when we use the sacred names or the vibrations of light.
If you look at the mystical texts, even the revelation of John the Divine, you hear the music of the heavens. Chapter 14, the celestial music breaks through at a certain point of planetary change.
So we're going to try a more complicated one.
Connecting the East with the Near East with the world in the Sanskrit, the Near Eastern languages, the Egyptian, Coptic, and also the Umma, the Arabic, and the Tibetan.
So the is like 3 vibrations inherent. It's almost like that Amen and Aman
that we did last night.
And Umma is both Tibetan and Arabic for the inner or the world soul.
Again, we asked Darren to lead us. Listen very carefully as he goes through it once. Together 3 times. We've seen music with the Dalai Lama when we were in Australia some years ago at the World Parliament. Musicians and others were there orchestrating certain sounds, and we saw around the mind of the Dalai Lama this spherical form. And then in Mexico years ago, this took place around the year 2000, I was singing in the ancient Hebrew Aramaic the names of God, and the sphere A light manifested like a shield around my body. A man was taking a picture of his wife in the crowd, and at the same second, the light burst took place. He was able to capture this. This is just one of many demonstrations of using sacred language that's now being restored, I believe, to the human race so that we can vocalize ourselves as human trumpets or biotransducers to activate the minds of young people that will overcome the stubbornness of dualistic in politics, sociology, and economics.
Reaching out is the same as reaching within. This is really a message you have to realize. So when you bring together the East and the West, the East mostly was within, the West was without. You bring them together through song and through vibration. And you'll find there really is no separation between the various realities. And this is really, in a sense, your higher essence that you're seeing here. We're going to jump ahead to the meditation section that we were needing to do. So just a few things on the spirit level, but I think we're all tuned into this.
Your governments are involved with what is called disclosure now on the extraterrestrial hypothesis, but Desiree and I have had experience with the indigenous and also privately in meditation, what we call the ultra-terrestrials. That would be the scientific expression for the angels and avatars, those who come from much higher existence and do not need material bodies, although they show themselves in face forms or light configurations.
Right, and so the ancients understood this, where you don't need a body, you're really just mostly in energy form. And these were seen in the angelic forces. You have Gabriel, means the God conquers, or man of God. He heralds the trumpet to bring forth new life. Michael, who is like God, which protects the divine seed. Raphael, the name Rapha actually in Hebrew means to heal. So Raphael is a healing energy or healing angel. And Uriel, which is what we're going to pick up on now, is connected with light. Or means light. So you have Or and El, light, the divine one, the angel of light. We're going to take this into our next meditation, and then we're going to keep the keyboard going and introduce you to sacred names as we go along.
So visualize yourselves now on this little planet Mother Earth, expanding your consciousness higher and higher and higher, with the upward and outward thrust of visualizing the energy field like wings of a dove. You are peacemakers sent into this world of conflict and change to be, as it were, of the upwing. Not of the left wing or the right wing, but of the upwing, dealing with the cosmic others, showing the upper.
Ein Sof is the limitless.
Uriel Ein Sof. Uriel Ein Sof.
Androgynous being, or the higher being, of both the left and the right, the male and the female, in unity. We see in the marvelous painting of Blake, the mountains, the landscape that the ancients understood was the higher point for a capstone reality, a prism of sound and light that would converge with the heartbeat, with the thought forms of divine positive thinking of the higher mind, also wedded to the heart, and ultimately through the realm of divine spirit, the overself that ascends and is able to work non-locally with the loving vibrations of a greater universe that is consistent with the human as a biophysical form of ongoing creativity. We behold the cosmogram, the sphere that we create with families around the world. And to global tonality or global coherence, the soundscape of Mother Earth awakens us to the ultra-terrestrial beings who are now coming into this plane, in this realm of experience, as our brothers and sisters.
Right, feel the oneness as we introduce still the power of or, but we add the power of oritone. Ori, 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 or. Feel yourself ascending into the higher power of light.
And feel the light beings, other dimensional beings that appear along with the spheres of light in higher states of consciousness when you are using music and you are using meditation together.
Oritone, ori, ori, ori,
Feel yourself ascending into greater and greater realms. Feel the sacred geometries unfolding around you as you are part of the divine grid point of light.
The sacred shield of David within the sphere of space and time.
And now you see that you are not alone.
And then you transcend this dimension and understand the fourth and the fifth dimension, or those coming from the higher realms of creativity.
And we understand the power of the seraphim, one of the angelic orders that we have talked about in the past.
Today, we would call them the lords or the scientists of the universe.
And they create their own energy vehicle with 6 wings of energy, so that they themselves have no powers of the physical body, but the energy body that is theirs.
To the left and to the right, to the front and the back, above and below, the 6 directions.
And so we add the word Shanti from the east, which means peace in Sanskrit.
Again, we see Blake's picture of humanity being strangled at the bottom of creation and then arising.
And we do this rather quickly because it doesn't always have to be slow. We can actually pick up the pace, the energy, as we sing twice the Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim.
Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim. Shanti, Shanti, Seraphim.
And the energy triplet of body, mind, and spirit converge like three female parts. The female part of the body that is creative, the female part of the mind that works on multidimensional levels of sound and compassion, and ultimately the spirit that is the divine feminine comes and converges between East and West in the historic image of the Divine Mother that gives birth, the Mother of the heavens, that brings us through the womb of space and time into incarnation.
And she has made multiple appearances around the world.
She is known by many names: Durga in the East, Maria in the West, Ima in the Old Testament.
And connected with the power of Shekinah, the Spirit, but also Sophia, the wisdom. And so as we behold the unfoldment of the Divine Mother in all of her manifestations, we see it as the creative power, the creative energy that expands out throughout the universe.
Emanations of light converge. And we hear the expression in the ancient Greek, Maria Sophia, the divine, which is the wisdom of birth. The divine, which is the new creation within our womb of space and time that brings liberation. The divine feminine that has been rediscovered, that reconciles the East and the West, the North and the South. As we see here in the cosmogram that depicts nature and the greater realm of co-creativity, putting on the wings of the dove.
Maria Sophia, 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 Maria Sophia.
And we project this mantra to the Middle East, where Maria or Miriam is understood in the great three Abrahamic traditions, and now she is the bridge of compassion as we move away from male-orientated theologies to those sociologies and theologies that are heart-centered in the Divine Mother. Even in the Eastern traditions of India, China, Japan, and beyond, we begin to feel the vibration of Durga, Lakshmi, and all variations of a whole new language that expresses itself.
And she also appears as the dove, the divine spirit. In ancient times, it was great love, great compassion, great understanding that manifests through her heart, through her soul, and through her higher manifestation of oneness with the divine. So no matter where we look, at the east or the west, the energy is there. And we know her also in the east as Kuan Yin.
We see her multi-level heads representing multidimensionality and non-locality.
As the divine mother of compassion.
We intone from the many languages, the Chinese, Japanese, the Sanskrit that speak of the Divine Mother. perfect our songs, Mother Earth and Divine Mother converge. A new time has come that captures the essence of the Divine Father and the Divine Mother within us. And thus we see Blake's picture multiplied several times within different spheres of consciousness unity. We are the dance of the eternal. When we accept that which we have rejected in theology and sociology and put to practice the unity.
And so let us expand ourselves into new realms. Let us not be afraid, but let us have that peace, that love, that joy, and that understanding as we interconnect with the divine presences that exist in the higher realms. Let us never forget that we are here to help humanity, to help the planet, all life forms.
And in the tree of life, the cosmogram, we see in the midst of this great ascension process of going from the pure material self to the mental to the higher vibratory consciousness state, the shield of Michael and the shield of the Shiantra becoming connected.
But if we were to go out into other realms, we would also be the light, be the way shower. And Jesus' last words on the cross was Eli, Eli. We're pronouncing it a little differently here for the reader, but let us sing this together. It's very, very powerful.
It was a musical teaching on the cross of space and time that all of us can enjoy and understand, and the deeper call for what some would call Elijah or the messenger from the higher vehicle of ascension.
Let us focus on the earth, on our family and friends who need our energy, or on any region or any place that your mind is drawn to send the higher power of both Om and Shalom, peace. Connected with the Shekinah.
The Om meets with the Shalom of the Near East and the West.
The Shekinah is connected with the presence of the divine everywhere.
Om Shalom. Shekinah, 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 Om Shalom.
And let us not be in fear of those who may come to greet us when we call forth the divine names, the divine blessings like Michael, who will come to protect you, or Raphael, who would come to help heal you, or Uriel, who comes to bring the light. And finally, we'll look at the vibration of the
Uriel.
Ein Sof Or is our final expression today.
And each of these names doesn't represent simply one avatar or one archangel, but a whole school of teachers. Those who are guiding the great changes that are coming in medicine, in music, art, and science. The light of the infinite is with us. We who are pilgrims along the path of the infinite way. A final blessing of the infinite, the Ein Sof, with the light.
Ein Sof means no thing, or also means light.
Now as we come together and see the new humanity, the capstone upon the mountaintops, the temples and the pyramids, the churches and the mosque, we realize that the great temple of the human body with music is the temple of understanding. The missing architecture, the stone rejected that connects all of the other architectures and temples into a greater embrace of the heavens and the earth.
So in conclusion, let us be the light. Let us be the love. And meditate, sing, and vibrate the power of the divine within you, collectively, and within all of us as a family of light.
And finally, the blessing of one who was coming. He was Melchizedek, and singing as a blessing to you the final words and the melodies. A blessing, listen.
Let us meditate on the vibrations of the greater frequencies of light that interpenetrate our brain, our mind, and our spirit.
The vibration of a world without end, the vibration of a universe without end, the vibration of a house of many mansions without end, and the vibration of the immortal soul without end. And so it is, and so it shall be.
And we ask you to say 4 amens with us for the closing of this session.
Amen, 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 and amen.
And we thank TCCHE for letting us go over and for giving this presentation. Thank Richard, George, and everyone.
We thank all of you. May the voice of unity, the voice of musical celebration, and the heartbeat of Mother Earth with all humanity be one in our lives together. as we go forth together as pioneers of the new future. Humankind graduating into spacekind, and spacekind becoming citizens of the house of many mansions. Amen, 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 and amen.
Thank you all. Put the lights on. So we do have a EU website. Thank you. So lights on. You can get those lights on. Thank you.